Welcome to episode 4 of Rising Above Trauma, Addiction, and Culture in a Crazy World. I'm Jim.
And I'm Michael.
In this episode, we will explore how trauma affects how we experience violence. We'll hear some excerpts from recent political threats, some quotes, and ponder the idea that it's coming only or mostly from the right. We will also examine how threats of political violence can impact mental health. Is American conservative culture inherently violent? How does a victim of violence cope with threats of political violence? How might our hypervigilance push us toward addiction? Finally, we will discuss our own recovery efforts to process our tendency toward hypervigilant reactions to threats of violence, both political and non-political. Michael and I are both in therapy and 12-step recovery, as I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago. So we'll use our experience, strength, and hope in the discussion. So, Michael, yeah, we're going to get started here. I'll let you start us off. And, why did we choose? What do you think? Why did we choose this topic, violence related to trauma, political violence and non-political violence?
Yeah, well, the simple answer is because we're both scared. You know,
Yeah.
the our obviously our political leanings run more to the left. And we look at Trump and we do not see the savior of the United States or the world or whatever he believes he is. We see a bully. And a bully who revels in violence, glorifies violence, loves violence, and that is disconcerting for us. That is frightening, and like so we kind of wanted to talk about um trauma in the political sphere. Um, so that is why we are doing this episode.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same way. I mean, when Trump um, would not accept the results of the election in 2020, and he formulated the big lie all the way up to January 6th, where I was actually teaching a class when that happened. I was traumatized deeply at that whole time. The first one is that if there's not a peaceful transfer of power, is there going to be a civil war? And
Yeah,
that is exactly, I mean, that's civil war in a way. My trauma guy likes the action. I got to get me a gun now. He's like, okay, let's make a plan. So there's part of me that kind of, it's exciting. But part of me is like, ugh. I mean, it's like, darn, man, who wants this? This guy won't even accept the results of an election, even after his own um, head of the Department of Justice investigates it and
yeah,
tells him there's not enough evidence to overturn an election. And even when there's 60 court cases, that they threw him out of court for not enough evidence.
yeah.
So
So
that
yeah,
right there was a really traumatic. I have not been traumatized as much as that period since.
yeah. I mean, I remember watching the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and I think one of the things that most bothered me, beyond the scenes of violence and the security, the Capitol Police being attacked and beaten, is the way that the right, the talking heads on Fox News and whatnot, have tried to, and in some ways been very successful about rewriting the narrative of that day. Like, Trump said, "Oh, it was a peaceful protest. It was a day of love," and bullshit like that, which immediately triggers me in terms of like my mother, like, gaslighting me, right? Like, you're trying to fuck with my reality right here.
Right. No, and that was a big part for me. Even their tourists, and then now bringing it that the the what I call the insurrection. Oh, for me, by the way, the insurrection, I seeing them attack the Capitol, that doesn't disturb me that much. I mean, that's never before seen. That is not happened. But the fact that it was the electoral count, the electoral
Yeah.
college count. So it's like, oh my God, you're going to really stop that. So it's like you literally are going to end peaceful transfer of power, the thing that we vote for, that we all agree to. So that was the whole thing. Then in related to trauma, when you hear some of the accounts of the doctor, especially I mean, the not the police, the Capitol Guards, that they were the one guy who was dragged into the crowd and thought he was going to die. And knowing all those guys were traumatized, and so many of them, some of them have different reaction, but so many of them is permanent trauma where you're fighting for hour after hour. I mean, I would have probably pulled my gun out and started shooting because that's part of my trauma reaction.
Oh, I
Yeah,
would have too. I mean, that's, I find it like so hard to like to imagine trying to reason with these people. It's like my visceral reaction is I can't reason with them. I got to kill them for
exactly. And
my own
that,
protection,
right. And
which
that's
I
like,
know is the way that they feel about those of us on the left. They have that we are just evil and bad and irredeemable and must be destroyed. So it's like,
well,
again,
from a trauma perspective, for me, let me just
yeah,
jump in. Um, the the issue for me is uh, um, I was abused by my father and I couldn't do anything about it. So now here it's coming again, and it's coming for hours, and there's 50,000 of them and 200 of us, whatever. We're outnumbered. I don't like it. I don't like this outnumber. I want to be outnumbered. I want to outnumber them. So
yeah,
for me, my part of my hypervigilant overreaction is, yeah, I mean, I have little tolerance for that setting because of the trauma. So it's like boom, 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 boom. That's the feeling I get because I just sitting in that place would be too much for me. But I want to move on.
yeah. Well,
So
and
so that was
I
good.
was gonna we're
All
gonna
right,
move
all
on
right,
to the
one more point
second.
and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the second question.
All right,
Which it kind of answers the first question. Like, as victims of trauma, and trauma is inherently an act of violence. I mean, that's, it doesn't have to be physical violence, but trauma is violence. It is psychic violence. So that raises the question: is American culture more violent than other developed nations?
yeah, and I say the answer is I don't know because I'm more of an academic, so I would tend to want to do a bunch of research about
Yeah,
how violent are there. But the easiest is that we have more guns than people. And if you have access to a gun where a little pencil neck person who weighs 48 pounds could murder a guy who's 6'8" and a muscle guy, mixed martial artist who's trained all his life, and I can just push my finger with a little bit of movement and I kill people, and the fact that we must have so much access to the guns, that I think is the one thing that makes our culture. I don't know if we're inherently more violent. I just think we have access to weapons of war on our streets. Most countries don't have that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that we go in waves. I mean, like, in terms of, is America like inherently more violent? I don't know. I don't think we're out there killing each other in the streets any more than any other developed nation. I mean, this is purely anecdotal, right? But it's that right now we seem to be in a cycle where there is a celebration of of violence, like, for Trump and the MAGA movement. They want to forcibly deport all these migrants, all these, and basically anybody that doesn't fit their definition of what an American is. Another thing he's trying to do is take away birthright citizenship, and that, like, deportation is, again, that's an act of violence. So it's like all of this is just words right now, or for the most part it's words, but it goes back to our hypervigilance of for me, I believe him when he says these that he wants to do these things. And like there are some people, and we've talked about this, like my wife is like, they all say shit, let's see if it really happens. And I'm like, we need to be prepared if it really happens.
Right. And my fear is that I was the peacemaker growing up, and I was the appeaser. And so, but I hear about sanctuary cities. And since the left lost the election, I kind of almost gave up, and a bunch of the immigrant people, macho stud people, voted for Trump. I kind of partly give up on that, so I'm not really all that concerned about them being moved out of here. It's like I'm back into a survival mode when it comes to this topic. And the
Yeah,
survival mode says, "Oh, well, Trump, it's sanctuary cities, so we got to bring the army in." And so you bring the army in, and then there's these certain things Trump said that liberals are evil, and so okay, well, you know what? Actually, we do need some of these undocumented. They work good, but the liberals are gross. So this idea you have this whole infrastructure set up for the undocumented, and now let's turn our eyes on the real evil. Americans are evil, which were stated many times by Trump, that these
yeah,
people in our country are not the undocumented, but the people who disagree with Trump are
are
evil.
evil. Yes,
Yeah.
and that I think goes to the root of what we are afraid of. He's basically talking about us. He is saying we are evil and we should be, wiped out or arrested, and it's very hard not to. It's hard not to take that personally. How do you not take that personally?
Right. And
Uh,
related to trauma, I might be more vulnerable to that. I have to do some extra recovery work to not I mean, I can take it personally, but that's a resentment. But as
yeah,
far as feeling full of fear and walking around, so it's affecting my mental health, my ability to be thriving in this world. That's my recovery from this trauma.
yeah,
So it can affect that. One thing I do is watch less of the big left-wing news because they're going to give me all of the worst stuff. I do
yeah,
know that. And so, but that infrastructure that would be required to remove 12 million undocumented people, and like you said, to do it thoroughly, you're gonna have to go to violence. Some of them would be not really violent, get out of here. Come on, you get out. And some of them are you're gonna got to dig into their house and their churches, and that's scary. So anyways, that culture, I'm not feeling it as much as I was with the big lie, but I do get triggered when Trump has a visit from the Canadian Prime Minister and then says Canada is the 51 state. Gosh, we were going to
yeah,
move to Canada. There's one place left. Oh, shoot, now it's the 51st state. Why would you say that, bully motherfucker? So it's
yeah.
like that just really
Well,
makes it
and
hard to let go of the trauma.
you talking about the language that we're using. Is there some sense of empowerment from that we are saying these things like bully motherfucker? That's what we wanted to say to our abusers, basically, but we couldn't. That was would have been a major threat to our survival.
Right. And
Um,
that is the trigger. Also, the idea that somebody in charge can do whatever they want and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's very parallel. Even if it harms you and harms other people,
yeah,
it's actually the election told me it's okay. It's actually valued for that. And lying, that's a good thing.
yeah,
Lying, I don't mean a little lie. Everybody lies. Big lies are
yeah,
good. That's the lesson. So anyway, so let's move on. We're going to go to, I do want to give you one statistic because one of our questions was, um, I'm going to skip to this one it talks about, well, so is there more political violence on the right? And, I know that's not true. I mean, I'm wait a second. I know that there's not no political violence on the left. Okay, so
Hmm.
I know that. And some of these anarchists, which I am kind of a little bit, but I can relate to that. But
Yeah.
I'm not anywhere near that. But the research I did some pretty extensive research, and they looked at it really, like doing a study of actual people and finding out what they're thinking and following it, doing statistical analysis. And I'm going to read this one quote from the National Academy of Science. It was posted on the NIH website in 2022, so it's not even current. It's but not that old. It says, when compared to individuals associated with right-wing ideology, individuals adhering to left-wing ideology had 68% lower odds of engaging in violent action.
Mm.
Okay, so that to me did 68% lower. That doesn't mean there's not, um, a
No,
chunk of
no,
violence
but
on both sides. So
yeah, but
to me, that's
you
clear.
know, like on the right, they believe in things like, and I don't know if they seriously believe in this, but like, I have a friend who's told me about like some of the Trump MAGA books, like about where the bad guys are Antifa super soldiers, which don't exist. I mean, there's Antifa, first of all, is not even like organized, centrally organized. It just means anti-fascist. I mean, my grandfather who fought in World War II was anti-fascist. So that's all it means. But the idea that there are these left-wing super soldiers, that's the stuff they pump out on Fox News to create this fear amongst the right. Um, but I think on the left we're more like, let's reason, let's talk this out. But um,
Well,
and
let
then
me
I
give you some.
sometimes,
Oh,
yeah,
can I jump in, or do you want to finish that thought?
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so some of the reasons I believe that on the right it might be more, I don't know, prevalent, but more intense violence, which is the the left tends to love, I mean, the right tends to love guns. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean people on the left don't have guns, but there's the very conservative people. I mean, they tend to maybe even worship a gun. Like, I mean, that's Bobert, right? She'd take pictures of her with guns behind her, almost a fetishing of the
yeah,
gun. So the idea of carrying a gun in public, or during the January 6th, there were more riots, or not riots, but protests at state capitals at the same time with armed people versus
yes,
a Black Lives Matter where they're not people with I mean, there's some people who had guns, but generally there's not a lot of people with guns. There might be people with guns who are anti-protesters at
yes.
those protests.
Like, what's his name? The one in Milwaukee, or
Kyle something. Yeah, the one who
Kyle?
was a
Yeah,
hero, right, on the right. So he's
yeah,
a hero for killing people with a assault rifle,
yeah, with an AR-15, exactly. Yeah, you don't see too many Antifa members with assault rifles.
Right, exactly. So that's one of the reasons where, I get more paranoid, but I'm becoming more willing to have a gun. It's like, okay, you got to, because my trauma guy says, no, you're not going to put me in that situation. No way.
Yeah,
So the trauma guy would get a gun. Then the next one is that the right, Donald Trump, the hero, is the creator of the big lie. And here's a quote about how essential the big lie is to the current political environment. It says the perception that an election was stolen is known to be a major instigator of political unrest worldwide, anywhere, not our big lie.
yeah,
The consciously propagated false narrative regarding election theft is directly linked to the growing support for violence on the right. So the idea that election was stolen, to me, you're supposed to go to the Capitol and start fighting. The
yeah.
election
Well,
was stolen. It is a requirement to fight. So to
yeah,
me, it's
it,
like you gave up your democracy, wussy. So, I mean, why aren't you shooting more people? But they
yeah,
will still propagate this lie. And Trump today still says that it was, stolen. And that to
Yeah,
me is in other words, my dad really, he's a doctor and he's successful. And so he really didn't do that much. He was just, sometimes you got a little bit carried away. And
yeah,
same thing.
yeah. It's what in the what you were just quoting there about the idea of theft and the idea that democracy is being suppressed, so you must take up arms to defend it. There, that very much echoes the American Revolutionary War, which was in no way like a revolution of the proletariat. It was colonial rich guys basically not wanting to pay tax to British rich guys. But the way that the American Revolution gets presented as some revolution of the people, and I see echoes of that in the Big Lie. So I would say that, yes, starting really from even before the American Revolution, there is that history of taking up arms in defense of quote unquote freedom.
Exactly. And they call it liberty, not freedom. That's why my book is Freedom and Dysfunction in an All-American Family. I use the word freedom. Um, but I will go on with more stuff about that because that same mentality also supported slavery
Yes,
because slavery would be a patriarchy, and the delusion, like the big lie, is that we are actually improving the quality of their lives. And they're savages and animals, so we are civilizing them, and
white man's good.
therefore we
Yep.
can abuse them. Okay. And then it's also colonialism. My father said this to at the one argument my father got in with my wife. This is a sober father, not a non-violent father. She's never seen anybody but a good guy. But the one argument was she made the mistake of talking about how her country was colonized, the Philippines, and he went on and on. This is a pretty normal person, conservative, and he went on and on saying, "No, we helped them. We helped them. We helped them." So all of this
Yeah.
harm can be justified on the right by, come on, we're civilized and we know better. We're daddy. We're the
And
boss.
and again, I think at the family level, do you have that same kind of justification with, where you have like, the abusive father or the abusive mother, right? I'm doing what's best for you. I know it's better for you than you do. And that's another thing that's very triggering for me, this idea that only I know what's best for you. And I definitely see echoes of my mother in that too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that ties into one of my other ones where the idea of respect your father or your mother no matter what. It's not completely people who are liberal don't have that, but it's like the right, the Catholic Church, the hierarchy. I mean, the one time in
Yes.
a meeting, I shared some stuff about my dad and the trauma he inflicted. And there was this really nice older Hispanic man, totally good guy, nice guy in every way. But he was livid after the meeting about how you don't talk about your dad that way. And I
Yeah.
mean, and he was a conservative Catholic man, and it was like, oh, so you can't talk. So my book is gone. Our whole podcast is gone. It's all done. Leave it alone. Go forward. Anybody who keeps whining about it and suffering with their trauma, they're just a bunch of complainers, man.
Yes. And that's the thing is, I so much fear being silenced by Trump, by the MAGA, because I mean, look, they're trying to ban books, right? That don't support their worldview, that challenge their world. So, I mean, it would be one thing, right, if they said, "This is what we believe. You can believe whatever the fuck you want to believe. We don't care." No, you are going to believe what we believe, or you're evil, and we will destroy you. And yeah, that's very triggering.
And that's same with abortion rights. Um, Abortion rights don't force women to have abortions. So all
Yeah.
the women in the country that would like to not have an abortion and have many kids as they want or never have sex, they can do it. Nobody's stopping them. But the idea of the women in a terrible situation who aren't ready to have a family, who may die because of it, who have no resources, um, they are forced to have a family. That is Handmaid's Tale in reality, and that's
Yeah.
already started. That started across many states. So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and as far as what's the trauma? Well, what if my daughter's forced to have a baby and she's absolutely not ready? Okay. So let's add to the trauma of more people that are forced to take care of a kid and they can't even take care of themselves. And then the
Yeah.
conservatives will say, what losers? Why are they whining? So it's
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what a catch
Well,
22
and that
there.
that goes to that point that you made about they don't they forget the learning from the mistakes of the past. It's like right, even with the immigration issue, right? The immigration issue of like all the horde of migrants coming across the border completely ignores that during the Reagan administration and earlier, we fucked around in these Latin American and Central American countries. We destabilized democratically elected governments because they were leftists and supported right wing dictators that brutalized their people because they weren't communist and that
Right.
therefore were good. But nobody wants to listen to that nuanced, that complexity that maybe the reason we had something to do with all these people trying to cross the border now 20, 30 years later. No, it's just these people are an invasive force, and they're really, they dehumanize.
Exactly. And that is, part of the that mentality that concerns me as far as my trauma, because my father passed away earlier this year, and I'm not going to get it, and I didn't expect to get it, but the one idea that he was able to have any remorse for all the violence he did on my family, all the trauma he put us through, because partly alcohol and drugs, but partly because he was a very violent person by nature. I mean, like really good at being violent, and he would lose control, or if you showed any disrespect, lack of loyalty, which is what we're dealing with now, perfect loyalty, which is what
Mhm.
then you are at risk. And so I'm still dealing with that type of dysfunctional behavior because you can't speak up for yourself. Could be death. It seemed like death. And that's how
Yeah,
this political environment is boy, if you do speak up for yourself, it's scary.
yeah,
And it potentially scary. That's what it seems like they're trying to do. So, anyways, we're at 7:52, which is 3 minutes away from ending. So I
yeah.
just wanted to
You want
see
to
if
talk about
there,
hypervigilance?
yeah, yeah, definitely. So the the real concern for us is not politics. Um, it is how living in a world, the current political world, with a hypervigilant personality that was created in our traumatic years,
Mhm.
how that makes it hard. And so, when I hear the 911, I mean, not now, the January 6th stuff, the big lie, all the way leading up to that, and then that fact that the guy who won still believes that, not a safe world. And one of the reasons I'm hyper vigilant is it's one of the things I've been working on all these 37 years of recovery is to believe that it could be possibly a safe world. And so
Yeah.
the political environment again is shattering that. And then every time I hear news like Canada is our 51st state, oh,
Or
that's
or
not
we're
even
gonna
safe
we're gonna
there now.
invade
So
Greenland.
exactly. Or I need to bring in the army because those darn blue states won't cooperate. So I just get little hits of
Yeah.
the trauma that leads me to want to go into hypervigilant mode. And so there's other things that trigger that, but the political environment is another fairly big thing that triggers that.
So what do and let's talk about like what briefly, like what do you do then to kind of respond to that? Like how, if if like somebody listening, they've grown up with trauma, right? They've grown, and the world is right now does not feel like a very safe place. What can people do?
Okay, there's a lot of things to do. For me, I do it. One, don't watch so much of the left wing news, super left, because they're going to give, I know this, both sides do this, the worst possible. That's what I'm going to hear. Okay. So
Mhm.
listen to some news, but try to do AP, Associated Press. Try to do, I watched C-SPAN the other day. It was so comforting. It was senator on the floor. It's like they're talking. I'm an intellectual, so I can handle this stuff. So it's like very cool stuff. So I watched that. That's one. And two is I remember that recovery is I need to focus on that which is in my control. And those big
Mm,
things are not in my control. And most of the time, I will probably self-sabotage way before Trump's going to do anything to me. And so I can do that, and I can reassure myself that it's not the situation that I grew up in. I am not being hit every day. I'm not in an unsafe house. So I can reassure myself that the situation is different, and I'm being wiser with my money in case something had to be done. So I'm trying to be careful with where I am financially so I could protect my family using financial stuff if I have to. But focus on the things that are within my control. How about you?
yes.
What do you do?
Yeah, it's really the same thing. It's like, I'm not saying it's easy to do, but the thinking, and this is part of that four-step inventory, right? Like, what do I have power over or in? What is my responsibility? What is my part? Well, I can't change how, you know, half the country voted. And it wasn't even half the country, it was just, the half that voted. I can't necessarily, so it's not easy, but to continually try to evaluate, and this is like, for therapy speech, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, what is it that I can have influence over? I can't control other people, right? So, you know, I, but I do have power over myself.
Right. I
So,
can, I mean, and for me also a big one is all of my addictions, they will destroy me. So really, Trump is a joke, a total joke
yes,
compared to my addictions that I developed as a result of trauma and probably DNA and other things that I did. But trauma was a good part of it. They they are monsters. I can actually compare them with the addiction, and that's actually comforting because he's an amateur. He's an amateur. He doesn't know how to do anything. The addiction carry
yeah,
is around me all the time, every day.
yes, and that is
And
very true.
depression is there, threatening, you
Yes,
know. So those
yeah,
things are more and focusing on the traumatic political situation, the way I view it, traumatic, is not something that is helping my recovery.
yeah,
That's another way to let that go. And then the other one is pray for courage. If I needed to do something to stand up for my values, pray for courage and wisdom as to what it would be I would do. Not to run away
mm,
like a little guy that wants to run away and
yeah,
appease, resist, but in a way, I'm an adult now. I can think. So in a way that would be may have consequences. Accept them, but do it.
yeah.
Have courage. And so that's that.
I really like that. I think that's a great note to end on. Um, you you want to do our outro, or am I doing it?
Go ahead. You can read our little outro.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on Rising Above Trauma, Addiction, and Culture in a Crazy World. We talked about some of that crazy world in this episode. For our fourth episode, look for our next episode coming in 2 weeks. We do believe that the worst effects of trauma and addiction can be overcome. That was the subject of our third episode. So I invite people to check that out if they haven't done that. That was the one that came out 2 weeks ago. And recovery starts with a simple, honest conversation.
And I want to add one more plug, Michael.
Yes.
If you would be interested in reading a book about trauma, recovery, and some freedom and fun in a affluent family in Southern California, check out my book on Amazon.
Yeah, it's
Freedom
and
and
it
Dysfunction in an All-American Family. That's the title of it.
yeah, and we can actually put a link in where the in like the Podbean too. We can do that as well.
Okay, thank
Uh,
you.
all right. Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, and we will be back with you in 2 weeks.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.